Last week I went and received a super special nice watch. Oh, of course, it's an Enicar. Can you expect anything else? No. I received a Super Divette Mark 1 that was in not the best condition, the bezel was not working, the case was damaged, but this guy, he was already on this. He'd sorted himself out a completely new old stock case from a Jet. We know it's the same, and he'd sorted himself out with something super rare. The original Super Divette bracelet, 19mm, which was only available for the Super Divette. Hey guys, welcome back to Horology Biology. In this video, I am going to strip down a Enicar Super Divette Mark 1 with a super nice bezel, I might add. I'm going to recase it with a new old stock case. I'm going to fit the original new old stock Super Divette bezel, and I'm going to rebuild it all. Okay guys, let's get on with it. So I've opened up the case back and I'm inspecting the movement, and it actually looks pretty good. It's not running great. The hands are also misaligned and the date wasn't snapping over correctly. I think it just needs a service, if I'm honest, because when I look at the movement, it actually looks in pretty good condition. So I don't think it's been used that much, if I'm honest. So first and foremost, always remove the rotor before you take it out of the case. It's a delicate item even though it's big, and it's very advisable just to take it away because it's only held on with one center screw. And if you put that movement down, maybe you angle it wrong or something, you could potentially just like bend it a little, and that wouldn't be good because this thing needs to spin freely. So out comes the winding stem and the crown. And now I can remove the case clamps from the watch, and then we can remove the watch from the case. But what about the bezel on this? Seriously, super fresh. Damn, it's so nice and juicy to see one that you don't see every day. And this one with the creamy color to it, yeah, definitely gets my Enicar seal of approval. So the movement holder screws are out of the way, and then I can remove the movement holder as well. It's just a metal ring, keeps everything nice and tight and in place. And then I can basically just flip over the movement and remove it from the case. The dial is actually not too bad of a condition as well. Yeah, I'm really in love with that bezel, super nice. So I'm going to pop off the crystal. This was the other problem with this watch as well. Like he mentioned to me, there's no crystal retainer tension ring underneath. And these are absolutely imperative for these watches. I've touched on it before in my videos saying that these crystals are special. They are special because that tension ring actually holds the inner bezel in place as well. What you don't obviously see or hear in the video is that his bezel was rattling around in the crystal, and it wouldn't engage properly because it was completely missing that tension ring. And those things are impossible to find unless you find an original crystal with the original tension ring. So now that that's popped out and moved to one side, I've just removed the hands from the watch. Just use the Presto tool for this because it's only 3 hands, so it's pretty straightforward. And that dial is really nice actually, like a really matte colored dial, super nice. Held in with 2 screws on the side of the watch, as you can see. And I'm just going to remove those, take them out, and then I can just use a screwdriver to slowly just pry off the dial, being careful with it. And if there's any background noise, I apologize because I think they're doing some kind of like gardening or something outside. So I think somebody's like mowing a lawn. And this guy's like been on this like since 7 o'clock this morning, man. I thought, you know, I wanted to do this video before I go away, and I thought, oh, okay, you know, I will just leave it a couple of hours. It's not going to take him that long. Man, it's not normal. This guy's been going at this for like 5 hours. I mean, how long does it take to mow a lawn, man? So the dial's off, and I'm just going to put it aside. You can pick up these little dial cases. They're cheap, and they keep everything super nice and secure. I put the hands underneath, and then I basically just pop the dial in and then close it off. put it to one side and forget about it. So removing the dial washer, and then I'm going to remove the hour wheel. And like I mentioned before, the movement actually looks in pretty good condition for its age. So far so good. So just removing the Canon pinion with a Presto tool. And now I've flipped the movement over and I'm just going to remove the automatic works, held in with 2 screws. And this basically means that when you're wearing your watch, it will charge the watch as you go, basically. So as you're walking around, the oscillating weight is spinning and it's actually putting a little charge on the watch every time that you're moving your wrist. So depending on what you're doing with your wrist, the watch is going to charge up really quick or really slow. Depends what you're doing. Yeah. So that's the automatic works off, and I'm going to actually break this down as well. It's important that you do break down all of these parts. As far as I'm concerned, the vast majority of everything that has a screw associated with it, you should unscrew it because dirt, grime and old grease can get in under there. And yeah, you need to basically do this, especially for an automatic work, because you've got the jewels on the other side as well that you need to peg and clean. And over the years they just get filled up with gunk and crap. And yeah, you need to help your cleaning machine with this, because cleaning machines are good, but they're not magicians. So just quick inspecting the wheels, and I inspect everything under the microscope as well. Now these little 2 automatic wheels, they are really prone to getting damaged because they're so thin, but these ones are actually in good condition, which is super nice. Because these parts are not that easy to get hold of, and once they're screwed, they're screwed. They have 2 pivots, one on each side. One is a lot longer than the other one, because as you can see, they have these little gears on there on the top which come away, and it basically means that the watch, it charges in both directions. Some automatic watches only charge in one direction, but with this particular model, it will charge the watch left or right, or clockwise or anti-clockwise, it doesn't matter. It's funny as well because when Enicar changed it, and they changed the design on, like, if I use the 165 as an example, and they used a more robust modified automatic works, and that one only charged one way. So that's the automatic works all done, all broken down, and now I can continue with the watch. So as I always say, I'm going to take off the balance. So held in with 1 screw, and then just slowly just pry that off with a screwdriver. I always keep a finger on top of it because the last thing you want is this to shoot off. And because there's so much weight on the cock, if the cock falls off, it's going to basically just pull the hairspring with it, and it will get tangled and it will get bent, and then you will have to sort that out. And that's not fresh. No sir, it's not fresh at all. You don't want that. So I always pop it aside, just lay it on a cushion. I also turn it upside down always as well, just to relieve any tension off of it. And I just cover that up and pop it aside until it's needed to be put back on the watch. So removing any tension from the watch, there wasn't really anything in this at all. Like I said, this watch was barely running as it was. So I'm just checking it, making sure that there's no tension in the watch. So now that that's done, I can start to remove the pallet cock. Just held in with the 1 screw, and then I can remove the pallet forks as well. So guys, if you're liking these videos that I'm churning out, I know there's a lot of people that watch that don't subscribe. Please, I cannot ask it enough. I would really appreciate it if you could take the time, take the effort just to hit that subscribe button. I'm trying to boost up this channel. I'm still surprised how well it's going. I mean, I'm over 900 subscribers now, which is super fresh, super nice. And as soon as I get to 1,000, then I can apply for the YouTube partner program, and it just opens up more doors for me because, I mean, at the end of the day, I do this all on my own back. I enjoy it. Plus, I'm breaking these watches down anyway, so it's nice to also give something back to the community, show you guys what I'm doing. But I also like the partner program because it can give a little back financially towards me, but then at the same time, it also opens other things on there. I can do more live streams, I can have super chats on there, and also what I would like to do is, I would like to get some HB merchandise out there. Stickers, some Enicar stickers, mugs, stuff like that. It'd be super fresh. So, without further ado, I would really appreciate it if you could do that. Just hit a like on the video, subscribe, and I would be in your debt for sure. So I'm just breaking down the motion works now, and there's 3 crown wheels for this. I'm going to call them crown wheels. They're probably like crown intermediate wheels, so to speak. You know, a lot of watches, they just have the one, whereas with this, as you can see, there's 3. And one of them is held under tension under a spring. It's not a really heavy spring, but it's just basically when the watch is being wound, it rotates it backwards and forwards between 2 of the wheels. It's pretty ingenious. Man, I was super gutted yesterday. So I had an Enicar mug and I dropped it. It's not fresh. I was basically drinking my juice. And the coffee mug, the Enicar mug, was empty. And what happened was when I put the glass down, I knocked the glass. And when I went to grab the glass so it wouldn't fall and break, my elbow knocked the Enicar mug, and that just hit the floor. But it didn't hit the floor, it hit the metal stand of my bench. And of course it was over, man. It was over. So I popped a picture of that on my Instagram, and yeah, not cool. I'd literally only had it 2 weeks as well. But I've ordered another one because I think they're super cool. If anybody's interested in those, by the way, I can put a link in the description. Where you can actually get those mugs, because it's not something from myself. There's a website and they have a few little bits of Enicar merchandise, a couple of t-shirts, a couple of mugs, and they're really nice quality and not that expensive, to be honest. So now I'm removing the training wheels bridge. Already removed all those little crown wheels off at the top of it, and now I can remove the wheels that are underneath the train bridge. It's held in with 3 screws, and there's also a hole as well there for the setting lever screw as well. So just gently pry it over with a screwdriver, and it should come away quite easily. That's another thing about this watch. I mentioned it to the owner, and I was really surprised by it as well. Virtually every screw on this watch was super loose. And I don't mean just a little bit. I'm talking like next level, I'm about to fall out kind of loose. It was really strange. So just taking the escape wheel out, part of it holds underneath the little bridge. So you need to be careful when you take that out. And now I can remove the mainspring barrel as well. And underneath you can see the little plate that holds the wheel, which drives all of the power from the automatic to the mainspring. So this bridge just covers the center wheel, held in with 2 screws, and it has a big jewel on the top as well, which is also very nice. Minimizes wear, which is really helpful. So that's just held in with 1 screw, and I just removed the plate for that, and then I can remove the wheel underneath. And as you can see, that wheel is actually held, or should I say it sits on a ruby post. It's not a brass post, it's actually a ruby post. Enicar, they did this on quite a few of the models, but it's one of those hit and miss things I find with working on a lot of Enicars. Some have them, some don't. It's very strange, even though it's the same caliber. Some will have a ruby post and some will just have like a brass post, which is part of the main plate. So I just took out the winding pinion and the sliding pinion, and then I've just removed the setting lever screw as well. Turn the movement on the other side now so we can get all the keyless works out, the plates that cover the date wheel, etc. So there's two of these plates that hold the date wheel in place. That's the minute wheel gone, literally gone, as you could see it fly off there. There's a really small intermediate wheel as well. Now I can just remove the other plate. You need to be a little careful with this one because there's a live spring underneath this. I mean, I'm a bit used to it now, but if you knock it around a little bit too much, you need to be careful that that spring that holds the date jumper, it could just fly. And it is a spring that's held under a lot of tension as well. So you need to be careful with that one. So now I can remove the date disc. Also actually in really nice condition. A little bit of dust on it, but I cleaned it with some Rodico and it came out really nice. Looks great. So now I'm just removing these two wheels, which basically help turn the date over. Also for the quick set as well, between 8 and 12. And they're also held in with a screw each. Also really important, those screws are very different. You cannot mix them up. If you mix them up, you will bore out one of the holes for the other one. You might feel that it's a little bit tight. I did it a long time ago and yeah, it's not good. You will cause yourself a big headache. So you need to make sure that every screw goes back in exactly the same place that it came from. So just removing the setting lever and the setting lever spring. These setting lever springs on Enicars as well, they're prone to breaking all the time. This one's all good, but you can see how thin that arm is. It is very, very thin. And they are prone to breaking, unfortunately. So a little bit of pegwood down while I remove the yoke spring and the yoke. And this watch is nearly broken down. Just cracked open the barrel so I can remove the arbor and also the automatic mainspring. Easiest way with these mainsprings is if you just free it with a screwdriver and then enough so that you can get a finger underneath, and then basically just feed it between your fingers and your thumbs, and it'll work its way out with the tension that it's holding. So watch completely stripped down and now in fast forward as usual, because I'm not going to bore you with it. This is called pegging the jewels, basically making sure that all of the jewels are just cleaned with some pegwood, getting all that grime loose and dirt out of there, ready for the cleaning machine. Now that once that's done, I can pop the balance and the balance cock back onto the watch for cleaning. Safest place to keep it when it's in the cleaning machine. It'll basically mean that it's not going to get banged around and it protects the hairspring as best as you can. Now just checking that it's engaged correctly, and I'd say that pretty much is. So before I throw all this in the cleaning machine, I'm just going to basically swap these cases out. So there's a tension ring that's held over the top. I've just removed that off with a knife because I need to change these inner bezels, and this crystal that's on it is correct and it's got the tension ring that we need. So first of all, I need to remove this crystal, and I basically put plastic on the inside, and then with the soft side of the hammer I will just tap it out. And if you use a press die in the middle, it just basically minimizes it cracking. So that's the crystal out, and then you can see the jet inner bezel there. Really nice condition, of course, as expected because it's new. And there's actually still 2 crowns on this as well. One's just loose because there's, as you can see, there's not even a winding stem on that. But I really like this Divette inner bezel. Really nice creamy color with a little bit of white on it as well. So just checking that the gear is in good condition and that it's working basically, which it is. And now that that's done, I can just basically replace the crystal. So giving it a quick air blow, making sure there's no particles on there, even though the case is open, so it's not that much of a big deal. And then I can basically press it on and then just snap that on, and then snap on the outer ring. I'm not going to do anything to this case. I mean, it's new old stock, so there's nothing to clean, there's nothing to buff up. And as we can see, we have a rotating bezel, so that's great. And this watch is going to look really nice in this case. And I've swapped the case backs as well. The original case back for the Divette was actually in pretty good condition, so it's not going to look out of place with this case at all, which is great. So welcome back to Horology Biology, and now we're on the rebuild of this super sexy, super juicy, super moist, Super Divette Mark 1. So everything has been cleaned, everything is super shiny and ready to go. And the first thing that I'm going to do in regards to this is basically oil these capstones. So I removed them. One is on the dial side, one is on the balance side, on top of the balance. And basically you want to remove them, you want to separate them because it's a 2-part system, and you want to use some fix-a-drop on the capstone so that when you add the oil to it, it basically doesn't run all over the place. Once you've added the oil and you put it back together, you simply just pop it back into the movement, flip back over the Enicar block spring, and then just nip it up. It just basically, I find the easiest way actually is to pull it towards you. Some people like to push the tweezers, but I find it easier if you actually pull the tweezers towards you. I find that you have more control this way, because it is a very, very, very thin little piece of metal, and they're a pain in the ass if they break because you're gonna have to replace it. That's not the problem. Finding one to replace is not the problem, but replacing it can be a pain in the ass. So just repeating the process on the dial side. I take off the capstone and I rub it, that's why the camera's shaking, on some paper, and this will basically remove any of the old oil that's still on there, and there will be some. Then I will give it some fix-a-drop treatment as I previously mentioned, and I can re-oil it while it's super shiny and super clean, just like glass. And once you've finished, it's the same principle. Put it back together, put it inside the movement, close the Enicar block springs, close the springs, there's one on each side obviously, and then you're good to go. But I really do like working on these movements. I've worked on them so many times now. Familiarity is definitely there, so I know what to look out for, what's wrong, what's right. And I must admit, so far this one has shown that I really think it's not being used that much at all. I was looking at the wheels under the microscope, and even the pivots, they were really in good condition. Like, most of the time you see stuff which is in good condition, but this was not good condition. This was really good condition, so saved me a lot of work anyway. So once that's done, I'm going to basically tackle now fitting a new mainspring. Now it's an automatic movement, it's not a hand winder. So when it's an automatic movement, you oil it differently. And what I'm using here is this nasty black, disgusting stuff, which is super expensive, called chrono grease. And you basically want to just grease up the wall of the mainspring barrel. Because this is a mainspring that will just keep on rotating and rotating. There's no break to it. So simply just press the new mainspring into the barrel and then fit the arbor. And then I can basically just put the cap back on and then press fit it down with this super nice little press tool. This tool's super nice, it just does it evenly and saves you damaging it in any way. Cheap to buy, and yeah, it's something you will have for life. It's not anything that's going to break or damage, unless you drop it like an Enicar mug, like me. Now underneath it has this little, it looks like a little extra ratchet wheel, and this is for the automatic works. So all of the power that comes from the automatic works connects to this gear, and this is, as you can see, connected to the arbor, and this will basically add the additional wind to the watch. You can wind these watches manually by hand, and there's no problem with that. Some people think, oh, it's an automatic, I should never wind it. No, there's nothing wrong with that. Just don't go crazy. You don't need to wind it crazy. But if you haven't worn an automatic watch in a few days and it's completely dead, in my opinion, there's nothing wrong with giving it about 10 winds to give it that nice boost, you know. So I've set that aside, and now I'm going to basically just add a little bit of 1300 to where the setting lever screw will go, also the center wheel. Excuse me. And then I'm just adding just a tiny little drop to the post where that automatic gear will go, that sends the power down to the mainspring. So just put that wheel on its ruby post, and now I can just put the little plate on top. That's held in with the one screw, as you can see. But people have asked me before, like, is it easier working on an automatic watch rather than a chronograph? Yes, bro, it is. I mean, it speaks for itself. It's less complicated. There's not as many parts, for example. But as I've mentioned before in other videos, the importance I find of working on a chronograph watch is try and see it as two watches in one. So work on the watch side of things to get it functioning, and then later go back to it and then tackle the chronograph side of things. It makes it easier for you, and it also gives time for the watch to settle. So just adding on this bridge which holds the center wheel in place, held in with two screws, as you see. And then I'm just checking that everything is engaged. And it seems pretty good. So now I can add in the mainspring barrel. And again, once I've placed that in, I'm just giving it a quick check to make sure that the automatic wheel and the center wheel are engaging against the mainspring barrel and the little ratchet wheel looking thing that's underneath that barrel. So I just added on the mainspring barrel bridge, and I didn't mention it, but you probably saw it in the video anyway. When I was stripping the watch down, I just checked to see if there was any play between the bridge and the arbor, and yeah, it was perfect. There was no play, which again signals to me that this watch has, I don't think it's been used much at all. I really don't. I think it's one of those little gems. And they do happen that you find these movements in watches that they've not been used that much, so the wear is very minimal, especially for a watch of this age. I mean, this is from the 1960s. So I added a little bit of 1300 to the arbor, and now I've just added in the click spring and also the click. And now I can build up the rest of the trainer wheels. Again, these are quite straightforward. A little bit of 1300 to the post of this. I'm not sure the name of this wheel now. My mind has gone blank. Fourth wheel, I assume. So just make sure that they're all in their pivots as best that you can. And hey, as you can see here, I forgot to add the setting lever screw. And that's very important, because if you put this bridge on and you haven't put in the setting lever screw, then you're gonna have to remove it. So when you add it, take your time and just make sure that all the pivots are lined up and that they're through the jewel holes before you screw it down, preferably. You can just hold it down with a little piece of pegwood just to secure everything, and then just make sure everything's free and engaged, and then you can screw it down. And that's running pretty free. So it's held in with the 3 screws. The one in the middle is quite beefy compared to the other 2 on the left and the right. Probably because it's got a higher depth, and it needs to go deeper than the other ones, considering the location. So even though it's an Enicar, as you can see, not wearing an Enicar on this watch. No sir, Speedmaster Mark II. It's been a while since I've worn it, and I must admit I really do like the Omega Speedmaster Mark II. Very nice watch. So just adding in all these little crown wheels, and they have these little washers that go on the posts. It's important that you remember that they do have those, because what will happen is if you don't realize it, there's a high probability that when it's in the wash, they will just come out. And if you weren't sure about them in the first place, you're not going to look for them, and they're very tiny. So then when you're rebuilding it, you're probably going to get confused and think, hey, there's too much space here, what's going on? And like I said, it's because they have these little washers. But again, going back to Enicar and their inconsistency, even though this is a 1145, I have seen some 1145s where they don't have them on every post. This one has got 1 on each one. Some of them I've seen it where they've only got it on 2. And it's not that it's missing, it was just never designed that it had a 3rd one. It's really strange. Enicar as a company, I must admit, with working on a lot of their watches, it never fails to amaze me the amount of inconsistencies that I do see on the same movements. It's very strange. So I'm just pulling the spring back, pulling the tension away, because when I add this plate, there's a little, like a little stud underneath that goes through one of the wheels. And if you don't remove this, if you don't move the spring out of the way, basically, you're not going to be able to engage it correctly. So it's just easier just to use a screwdriver, just to hold that spring out of the way. And then you can tighten everything up. And it's funny as well with this, because I'm actually holding it back with the screwdriver that I want it to use. So the screwdriver that I'm using to tighten these screws down with is too big. So as you can see, I only tightened it down like halfway, and now I've released the spring. Now I use the screwdriver I want to use to finish the job. Because that's another thing, it's really important that you use the right size screwdriver for the screw. If you use one that's too small, there's a high probability that you're going to slip and it's going to scratch the movement or something. And if you use one that's too big, well, then you're probably going to end up scratching the movement and rounding it around the screw as you're tightening it up. And both of those scenarios are not fresh. So now I can put on the ratchet wheel, and that's just held in with one big screw. And I just give it a little wind just to make sure that everything's engaging, because as I turn it, I should see that all the wheels turn freely, etc, etc. So now I've turned the movement over, added a little bit of grease to the winding pinion, and then I just pop that in place. You probably noticed that I just put in the setting lever as well, and then I just tighten it up from the setting lever screw from the other side. In goes the sliding pinion, and I've just popped in the crown as well, and then I've tightened it up so it's locked in place now. So a little 1300 now where the intermediate wheel is going to go, and for the minute wheel as well. And you can see on this minute wheel it also has a ruby post. Some do, some don't. And if I'm honest, I don't like them because they have a high tendency of popping out, which is kind of annoying actually. Never had one that's broken on me, but I have had them where they just come out because they're friction fit. And if I'm honest, I don't think it's a good design, I really don't. So on goes the minute wheel, and then I can put on the small intermediate wheel as well. Now the intermediate wheels on these Enicars, it's not flat on both sides. One side is flat, the other side is kind of like a little bit beveled. The bevel side needs to go on the bottom. So a little 1300 where the yoke's gonna go, and I can just pop that in. And then that will just rest on top of the sliding pinion. So when you pull out the crown to set between the winding the watch or timing the watch, this is what's moving. And now I'm just going to engage it with the yoke spring. This spring is held under quite a lot of tension as well, so you really need to be careful with that one. You don't want it to fly everywhere. And now on goes the setting lever spring. Just added a little bit of 9504 grease to that at the top, as you can see, that blue stuff. I like it that they use these bright colors, because when you add too much, and most of the time with greases, I do add a little bit more than I should, but you can see it quite visibly, so I can clean it off with some Rodico afterwards, so it's not a problem. It's better than it being transparent, is what I'm trying to say. Just check that it's engaging correctly, which it is, and it's also making sure that I'm lubricating it between the setting lever. And that's fine. Just clean off any excess grease, because you want to keep things all tidy and fresh. So a little 1300 to where these date wheels are going to go. And this one connects it from the underside as well. So it has quite a thicker cog underneath it. And that connects to that other wheel that I've just put on just before. And that's held in with just one very thin screw. Like I mentioned before, don't mix these screws up because they are very different. And that's engaging super nice. So now I can put on the date disc. Oh, the date disc. And I'm just giving it a quick wipe with some Rodico. And I much prefer these things in red. I think they look a lot nicer in red rather than black. So just put on the first plate. And that's held in place with two super tiny screws. So you need to use a very small screwdriver for those. And we're definitely building this up pretty quick, which is nice. One goes on the date jumper, and then that's also held under tension by one small spring. Don't misunderstand this spring. It's very small, but this thing will go far if it flies off, believe me. So just check you've engaged that while keeping your finger down on that pegwood. And then you put a little plate over the top of this and it keeps it all secure. The other thing that's important as well is just to give a little bit of 1300 to the tip of the jumper. And then what I do is I turn the quick set date like a few times, and then I'll give it a little bit more oil, and then I'll do another 5 days, and then I'll give it a little bit more oil. Basically that you're trying to just lubricate up the teeth from the date disc. So that's completed, and now I turn the movement over and I'm going to put in the pallets. I've cleaned these and I've also given them some fixer drop treatment as well. So once they've been in the fixer drop, you basically want to just blow that off. Then I use a little bit of wood just to clean off the fixer drop from the pivots, because I want to minimize as much friction as possible when it's in the watch. And then I can pop the pallets into the movement. And once they're in place, then you can put the pallet cock on top. And then what I do off camera, as you guys probably already know, I will lubricate the exit jewel on the pallet forks. And I will do that 3 times over a set of 5 teeth from the escape wheel. You're basically just making sure that you give each tooth of the escape wheel a little bit of lubrication. And also, most importantly, don't oil the pallet fork jewel, which is on the cock. You don't need to put any oil onto that. If you did, it would probably actually cause a lower amplitude on the watch, which is not cool. So now that's all done, now I can go back and get my balance and add it onto the movement. Take your time on this. Make sure that it's basically engaging correctly and sitting correctly. And then once it is, you can basically just screw it down. And the watch should fire up if you've done your job right. And that's fired up quite nice. It's looking pretty fresh. Kind of happy with that. So last but not least, I need to rebuild up the AutoWorks for this. So I add a little bit of 9504 grease to these two automatic wheels, and they will have an additional little gear on top. And as you can see, they are slippery little suckers. You need to be careful with that. I also add a little bit of 1300 to the extended post on these as well, and you'll see in a minute why. They have two additional cogs, if you want to call it, that go on top of these long pivots, and then they connect and lock in. They look very similar to the design on the winding pinion and the sliding pinion, so that they lock in place when they're turning. And then there's a little friction spring that goes on top of these, and that's held in with one screw. And after this, there is a wheel which will be put in place, which connects to the two. And then the pivot from this goes all the way deep into the watch and connects all the way down to that automatic gear. I forget the name for it, if I'm honest, which then connects to the mainspring. And this is also a point which can fail a lot, because if you think about it, it's a lot of stress just on this one wheel. When you think about it, everything depends on that pivot being good. So once it's all engaged, then you can basically just pop on the little bridge on top, and that's held in with just the two screws. And then I use a little bit of 9010 and oil up the backside of these two jewels. I also repeat the process on the other side as well. And that's the automatic works done. Give it a quick test to make sure that the gears are running correctly, which they were, which is super nice. So like I said, a little bit of 9010 here. And of course I need to oil the watch. I usually do this before, I forgot to do it. I bet you guys were thinking, hey, HB man, you haven't oiled this watch, what's going on with you? 1300 on that center wheel and 9010 on the other two, and then I repeat the process on the back side as well. Now with the automatic works, don't just slam this on and screw it down. The best way is to basically just place it on, lightly hold it with a piece of pegwood and wind the watch. The pivot will find its way each and every time, guaranteed. Like super easy. It's the best way to do it. You're minimizing damaging that in any shape or form. And you'll see one of the automatic wheels will turn as you turn the crown, and then you know you basically got it in correctly. It really is the best way. I can't stress that enough. Don't just slam it on and screw it down and then think, oh, it's all good. And that's held in with the two screws, as you can see. So now I turn the watch back over, just because we're going to get to, obviously, to put in the dial on it. Little 1300 on the cannon pinion, so I can put on the hour wheel. And then I just quickly check as well with the crown to make sure that it's engaging on the minute wheel. And now I can add on the dial washer as well. And now we're ready for the dial. And the condition of this dial is also in pretty damn good condition. Typical like Enicar Super Divette stroke Sherpa Ops kind of dial, this deep matte black, almost furry texture to it. It's very strange. So I just pop that on, and then I nip up the dial feet screws, one on each side. And you don't have to tighten them up crazy, just until you can't go anymore, and that's enough. You don't want to over tighten these. because the dial feed, it's brass, it's a soft metal, and you would rip through it if you're not careful, I suppose. So now I just want to make sure that I set the date to 12 o'clock as well for refitting the hands. And it's in the usual order, of course. It's a simple, straightforward procedure, obviously, with it being this type of watch. So the hour hand goes on first. Make sure that you've got it to 12 o'clock because it's a date watch. And you obviously want to do that so that when you're winding your watch, you want the date to snap over at 12 and not some other random time, because that would not be fresh, no sir. You would be all confused, thinking it's a completely different day. So that's on, and then I just set it to 12 o'clock, and now I can put on the minute hand. And also when you put it on these hands as well, make sure that you keep checking them as well, because you don't want them touching each other. It'll create drag on the watch, and in most cases it will actually just stop the watch from running. And the hands are just friction fit, simply just press them on. If you've enjoyed this video, guys, please hit a like on it. I would super appreciate that. Feel free also to subscribe to the Horology Biology channel, and that way you're going to get notifications of when I'm dropping other videos or the live streams, etc, etc. So win for both, yeah. And last but not least, I put on that nice single lollipop seconds hand. Still has the original loom on it as well, which is super nice. Good condition as well. Quick blow on the dial, and we're getting close to casing up the watch. So I'm adding in a new gasket, obviously, because the old ones, yeah, I mean, doesn't matter if it's new old stock, it's still going to have an old gasket on there. Oh, and this is already starting to look super, super juicy. Pretty sure you guys will agree. So once the movement's in with the movement holder, I will obviously pop in the crown with the winding stem. And then it's held in with two movement holder screws. They both have two little clamps which nip underneath the inside of the case to keep it secure. One on each side, and then they're just held on with two screws. So a little tiny bit of grease as well, just below the screw for where the rotor is going to go. And that's the very last thing that's going to get put onto the watch. And that's held in place with just one big screw in the middle. Again, don't over tighten this. You want it tight, but don't go crazy. But the condition of this movement looks really nice. I mean, look at that super nice brassy gold color. And then we just pop on the Super Divette case back. Like I mentioned before, his case back's pretty good condition as well, so it suits the watch really well. Must admit, I'm a little jealous. So just checking it on the Timergrapher. I will of course regulate it in a few days once all the oils have settled and everything, but let's see how it runs from service. Amplitude is really nice and high, which is great, want to see that. Little bit of beat error, but it's not an issue at all. I can knock that out, no problem at all. But overall, I am happy with how it is running. And last but not least at all, we have to add this strap, which caused me an absolute headache. It took forever. Beautiful strap, pain in the ass endlings to fit. There's just no room in there. And there we have it, guys, the Enicar Super Divette Mark 1, reference 145.004, full stainless steel 36mm. Absolutely beautiful watch.